Hello, friends of more, friends of the management of reality. Today we're going to talk about a difficult issue, but one that is very important to discuss. Does Jewish goodness sabotage Jewish self-defense? And I will answer in the affirmative. I've expressed my views with a lot of care in the Substack page, which is where we publish our articles. So I'm going to share my screen for a second so that you can see where this is, and you can then go read about it if you're interested. Okay. So this is our main page, and the article we just published has this title: Does Jewish chesed, is how you would say goodness in Hebrew? Does Jewish goodness sabotage Jewish self-defense? Okay. And if you click on that, you get to the article, and you will see basically what I'm about to say now, except that prose is always a little bit more careful and a little bit more rigorous than a verbal exposition. So if anything I say here feels incomplete or perhaps too quick, then I do urge you to go check the article, where I think I will satisfy you that the reasoning is sound. Okay, so what am I talking about when I say that Jewish goodness might sabotage Jewish self-defense? Well, let me first tell you where I am speaking from. So I am not Jewish. I was raised in a Mexican Catholic family. So I am a foreigner to Jewish society. I am what Jews call a goy. And as an outsider, as a professional anthropologist, I've been working within Jewish society, interacting with Jews, observing them, befriending them, sharing experiences with them, for over 20 years now. This is what anthropologists do, right? I'm a professional anthropologist, and our method is called ethnography, which means basically it's a fancy term for saying hanging out with people. So you hang out with people, of course, paying special attention to the process of your own socialization. And by paying attention to that process, you hope to gain some analytical understanding of how that particular culture works. In other words, how do the different pieces of their belief system and their norms and their traditions and so forth, how does this all fit together to keep them sort of in a relatively stable way working as that kind of society? And so this is what I do. And I've been, as I say, experiencing the Jews and studying the Jews for over 20 years now. It's been very interesting. It's been very fascinating, rewarding process. And I'm going to make two generalizations that are based on that experience of professional anthropological work with the Jewish society. The first one is that the Jews are morally good. And the second one is that the Jews are too good. Okay? All right. The first claim, that the Jews are morally good, if we make it a little bit more complicated, what it's saying is that most Jews try to be good because ethics is the center of gravity of Western civilization. Forgive me, of Jewish civilization. Well, I mean, the slip is reasonable, because Western civilization is in fact a product of Judeo-Christian thought, which is itself fundamentally, in its most important ethical way, Jewish thought. So yes, Jewish civilization, in a sense, is the core of what ethics means in Western civilization. But what I meant to say is that the Jews are morally good, as Christians also try to be, because ethics is the center of their civilization. Okay, this is what Judaism is all about. And however, if there is a, like I would say, a law of the universe, a law of the social universe, which says that any virtue, if you exaggerate it too much, you turn it into a vice. Okay, there is no virtue that if you don't go crazy with it, you won't ruin it and turn it into a vice. It's a law of the universe. And it is true for every single virtue, including goodness. So if you go too far with goodness, you will make it pathological and you will turn it into a vice. Okay. And this is what I'm saying has happened to the Jews. Okay. So the Jews are morally good. That's my first claim. And my second claim is they are too good. They've taken it too far and it has become a pathology. All right. And this is why I am saying that Jewish goodness sabotages Jewish self-defense, because when Jewish goodness becomes a pathology, because it's been exaggerated beyond the point which is reasonable, which is in fact ethical, what happens is that Jews make themselves more vulnerable, okay? And it is not ethical to make yourself vulnerable. I'm going to explain that in a second. Okay, so I'm going to justify both of my claims. The Jews are morally good and the Jews are too good. And then I will make a third claim, which is that we need an urgent grip on this, because this problem that I'm trying to explain has cost many, many Jewish lives, and it will cost yet many more lives. Okay, so why am I saying that the Jews are morally good? I'm gonna approach this claim by making a comparison, because everything is relative, nothing is absolute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare Jewish society to a very different kind of society, so that you can see why in the comparison it becomes obvious that Jewish civilization is morally good. Okay, so the two things I'm going to compare is, on the one hand, Iran, which is the Shia Muslim state, and on the other hand, the state of Israel, which is the Jewish state. One is the jihadi Shia Muslim state, okay? Because and that theocracy is controlled.
Francisco, we lost you for the last 2 minutes, more or less.
Okay, so you need to tell me. You need to tell me how far back I need to go.
Like 1 to 2 minutes. I'm not sure where you.
Can you remember what I was saying?
I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Don't worry about it.
So I repeat again the entire point that you were saying.
So anyway, just to close my introduction, I'm going to be defending then that the Jews are morally good and that they are too good. In other words, this law of the universe that I was describing, which makes it that any virtue that is exaggerated beyond a certain point becomes a vice, right? That applies to goodness as well. And so the problem we're having now, as we've had in other historical periods, is that the Jews, by being too good, by trying too hard to be good, they make themselves vulnerable and thus impose a tremendous cost on Jewish self-defense. This sabotages Jewish self-defense. Okay, so I'm going to justify both claims, and I'm going to make a third claim, which is that it is urgent that we get a grip on this, because it has cost many lives and will cost many more. Okay, so when I say that the Jews are morally good, I need to anchor us in a relative comparison, because there are no absolutes here. So I'm going to make a comparison between two different systems. One that I consider evil, which is the jihadi Shia Muslim system of Iran, and a system that I consider good which is, or fundamentally ethical, which is the state of Israel, the Jewish state. Okay? All right, so let's get started then with Iran. Iran is governed by a jihadi Shia Muslim religious theocracy, at the top of which sits the supreme leader. This is, believe it or not, this is an official title. So the supreme leader that is today in office is Ali Khamenei, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And to get an idea of the guy's style, in 2014, he tweeted that, quote, Israel has no cure but to be annihilated, unquote. He says that sort of thing all the time, okay? The genocidal destruction of Israel, the extermination of the Israeli Jews, is for Ayatollah Ali Khamenei a mystical mission, okay? It's his obsession. And this is a continuation of a tradition that was inaugurated by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who was the founder of the jihadi Iran that we know today. Okay, so this is a relatively this is a tradition that has some years now. It's been about half a century. All right. So this Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, in order to kill the Israeli Jews, is willing to sacrifice the Iranian population. This is now known beyond the shadow of a doubt, because the instrument of choice of Ali Khamenei to destroy the Jews is the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, which is entirely corrupt and addicted to central planning, and so obsessed with building weapons, with which to destroy the state of Israel, and also with funding various proxy armies to encircle Israel and destroy it, right? That they have obliterated the welfare of ordinary Iranians. They don't care about that at all. They're so consumed by the mission, the mystical mission of destroying the state of Israel, that they have zero regard for the welfare of ordinary Iranians, and they have destroyed them. They have destroyed them because Iran has now run out of water. And we just did a live on this. We did a live podcast on the Iranian catastrophe that is now at our door. This is going to be one of the greatest humanitarian catastrophes that any of us has ever witnessed. Any day now, there's going to be millions of Iranian refugees moving in search of water because Iran has run out of water. In early November, the president of Iran said that if they didn't get some rain soon, the city of Iran might have to be evacuated. Now, heads of state don't make public statements like that until the very last minute. So it's already the very last minute. Okay? And we have, as I said, we have a live podcast on this issue. We also have an article on our website on this issue. It's a tremendous thing. It's amazing that the news is not only about this every single day. It really is amazing. But soon it will be. Once people start moving, it will be. Okay? So anyway, returning to the point, the Iranian Ayatollahs are so consumed with destroying another people that they have destroyed their own people. And this is literally true because if you start the comparison between Israel and Iran, say in 1948, which is the year that the modern state of Israel was born, okay, 1948. So let's start the comparison then. Well, on that year, Iran has a giant territory, 1.6 million square kilometers, deep aquifers, diverse climates, including snow-fed mountain ranges like Zagros and Alborz, with dozens of major river systems replenishing the aquifers, vast forests in the north, in the Caspian Basin, marshlands in the south. Yeah, plenty of desert. It's true. There's plenty of desert, but it had all these other climates, and it had plenty of water, and it didn't have such a large population. There was enough water for everybody. What about Israel? Israel was comparatively in a much weaker position in 1948 because, first of all, the landmass of Israel is the tiniest landmass imaginable. It's 20,000 square kilometers in 1948. It's about the size of Connecticut. Okay, Connecticut is one of the tiniest little states in the United States, in the Northeast coast. Go look at the map. Once you understand the size of Connecticut, you will understand the size of Israel. It almost doesn't exist. Okay? It is 1.26% of the size of Iran. That's Israel. That's all it had in terms of landmass. 1.26% of the size of Iran. And it's mostly semi-arid or arid land. There's only one major river, the Jordan, one river, not a huge river. And not only is it not huge, but it has to be shared with Jordan, okay? And it's entirely insufficient. There was no deep exploitation of aquifers yet. Very highly seasonal rainfall concentrated in the north and center. And most of the landmass of Israel is desert. It's the Negev desert. That desert is about 60% of Israel's landmass, okay? Furthermore, whereas Iran had no great geopolitical threats to its access to water, Israel has all kinds of geopolitical threats. In 1948, Israel has just survived a genocidal war launched by the combined Arab Muslim states against her, okay? Just barely survived the genocidal war. That's her condition in 1948. So obviously, Iran started off in a much better position than Israel in 1948. But while the Ayatollahs encouraged massive population growth to recruit more soldiers for Iran's genocidal armies, and while the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, commandeered the entire Iranian economy for its own genocidal purposes and for theft, pure and simple, thus ruining Iranian hydrology beyond recovery. The Israelis, on the other hand, were engineering their own hydrology wisely. They pioneered drip and micro irrigation, developed a national water grid which combines desalination plants, water recycling, aquifers, reservoirs, and a dynamic network of pipelines and pumping stations to send the water where it's most needed at any given moment. They created the National Water Carrier, a massive north-south water conveyance system to make the Negev Desert bloom agriculturally. They built the world's leading desalination plants with the best technology. They achieved around 85% of wastewater recycling, highest rate in the world. They've got intelligent water pricing structures to incentivize conservation. They've got plenty of institutionalized education for water stewardship. And they designed their agricultural sector around crops that make sense for the kind of water that they have, for farming for sustainable periods of time, like you would expect rational people investing in life to do, So this is quite the contrast. Even though it was Israel that started out with very little water, very poor soils, and intense security constraints, Israel today is water secure and blooming, whereas Iran will now be wiped off the map and without being conquered. Okay? Now, the most frustrating aspect, I think, about this entire Iranian catastrophe that is now at our door is that it didn't have to happen. it could have been averted if not for the fanatical Jew hatred of the Iranian Ayatollahs. Because in 2018, 7.5 years ago, when this Iranian catastrophe could already be seen on the horizon, right? Because I mean, everything is about, shit is about to hit the fan any day now. But obviously, you could have seen this coming 7 years ago. Of course, of course, lots of people saw this coming. And in fact, 7 years ago, Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, made a video in which he offered to save Iran. I'm going to read to you what he said, and you can go look at the video if you want. It's linked in the you know what? I'm going to play the video. It's easier. Let me play the video, but I need help from Yoel. How do I do this, Yoel?
You want to share the video of Netanyahu?
Yeah, let's show him the video.
You have it already in your
Yeah, I got
computer?
it ready. I got it
Okay.
ready.
Just press the button below to share the screen, and
Okay.
or you can send it to me.
No, I'll do that.
Okay.
Here we go. All right.
Today I'm going to make an unprecedented offer to Iran. It relates to water. The Iranian people are victims of a cruel and tyrannical regime that denies them vital water. Israel stands with the people of Iran, and that is why I want to help save countless Iranian lives. Here's how. Iran's meteorological organization says that nearly 96% of Iran suffers from some levels of drought. Issa Kalantari, a former Iranian agriculture minister, said that 50 million Iranians could be forced out of their homes due to environmental damage. 50 million. Millions of Iranian children are suffering due to mismanagement, to incompetence, and the theft of vital resources by the Iranian regime. Now, Israel also has water challenges. We've developed cutting-edge technologies to address them. Israel recycles nearly 90% of its wastewater. That's far more than any other country on earth. We invented drip irrigation. Our technology targets individual plants with exactly the nutrients they need for each plant. Israel has the know-how to prevent environmental catastrophe in Iran. I want to share this information with the people of Iran. Sadly, Iran bans Israelis from visiting, so we'll have to get creative. We will launch a Farsi website with detailed plans on how Iranians can recycle their wastewater. We will show how Iranian farmers can save their crops and feed their families. The Iranian regime shouts death to Israel. In response, Israel shouts life to the Iranian people. The people of Iran are good and decent. They shouldn't have to face such a cruel regime alone. We are with you. We will help so that millions of Iranians don't have to suffer. The hatred of Iran's regime will not stop the respect and the friendship between our two peoples.
All right. So this contrast is, it couldn't be more obvious.
Welcome to the panel on Iran and the changing regional security.
Forgive me. So the contrast here couldn't be more obvious, right? We have a culture that is obsessed with destroying another people, and in doing so destroys itself. By simply directing money away from, truly productive and reasonable activities to building weapons and subsidizing armies and doing all this horrible stuff. And the consequence is now that Iranians have run out of water, right? So that's one culture. And then you have this other culture that takes care of its own water, that makes sure that every citizen has access to water and is offering to save the society that is run by these monsters that want to destroy the Jewish people. These are two very different societies. Now, I don't think Netanyahu did what he did because he is a saint individually. I think he did what he did because that's the sort of thing that makes Jews proud. And Benjamin Netanyahu is a Jewish politician, you see. Ali Khamenei, instead, in his speeches, he says, death to the United States, death to Israel, blah, 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 because that's what makes his culture proud, you see, his jihadi culture proud. These are two very different cultural systems. So when I say that that the Jews are morally good, yeah, I'm making a generalization. I'm making an anthropological generalization that is entirely justified by the very different centers of gravity, of moral gravity, of these two societies. Okay. Of course, this doesn't mean that every single Jew is a good person. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that Jews are socialized to try to be good, and that being good is part of Jewish identity. That's what I'm saying. And I am saying that most Jews do try to be good, right? These are anthropological generalizations. So to say that the Jews are morally good is like saying that Mexicans speak Spanish. Got it? Not all Mexicans speak Spanish, but nobody complains if somebody says the Mexicans speak Spanish. Everybody thinks that's a reasonable generalization because the statistics show that the overwhelming majority of Mexicans can at least speak some Spanish, which is the official language of Mexico, and a very, very strong majority speak Spanish fluently. All right. So if anybody says the Mexicans speak Spanish, everybody will think that perfectly reasonable thing to say. In the same vein, it is perfectly reasonable to say that the Jews are morally good. Okay. And the statistics bear this out. So to take one statistic, one relevant statistic, the rate of homicides committed by Jews in Israel is among the lowest known for any major ethnic group in the world. I think it's tied with Japan in terms of the lowest homicide rate in the entire planet. Okay, so the generalization that the Jews are morally good can be supported with an empirical measurement, which can be expressed in another generalization, which is that the Jews do not commit homicide. All right. Now, I think many of our viewers are probably ahead of me in intuiting a connection between the low homicide rate in the Jewish community and the religious commandment, you shall not commit homicide, Exodus 20:13, which is most often rendered incorrectly in Shakespearean English as thou shalt not kill. Right? That's not what it says in Hebrew. It says you shall not commit homicide, which is a very important distinction, because you can kill in self-defense. Okay, it is moral to kill in self-defense. Now, the obvious hypothesis is that Jews are morally good precisely because their civilization is founded on the exploration of ethics. Okay, and there's no question about that. That's a historical fact. The ancient Pharisee, the Rabbi Hillel the Elder, the founding father of rabbinical jurisprudence, of the entire process of deriving Jewish law, okay, and hence the most influential rabbi of all time, that guy, Rabbi Hillel the Elder, he elevated the biblical commandment, love your neighbor as you love yourself, Leviticus 19:18, into the fundamental commandment, the alpha and omega of Jewish law. Everything in Jewish philosophy, law, religion, it all has to be consistent with love your neighbor as you love yourself. Rabbi Hillel the Elder is one of the great moral teachers of the human species, a treasure, a historical treasure. And he has but a handful of peers. You know, I mean, he's in the same category with people like Mahatma, forgive me, Siddhartha Gautama and Martin Luther King. Yeah, and Mahatma Gandhi. You know, he's in that category. He's one of the great moral teachers of humankind. And he lived in the century before Jesus, and he was very influential on the thought of Jesus of Nazareth, who was another great moral teacher. So it makes perfect sense to expect that Jews will on average try to be morally good if the entire meaning of being a Jew is this: love your neighbor as you love yourself. Makes sense, right? So my analysis so far has been from the point of view of sociocultural anthropology, right? I've been talking about the sort of the strong values and principles that are components, or let us say fundamental components of the process of socialization inside a particular culture, right? The Jews, and how that kind of socialization is functional to maintaining a particular structure, you know, the structure of Jewish society. And this is the kind of analysis that sociocultural anthropologists like myself engage in ever since our founder, Bronislaw Malinowski, invented this mode of analysis, which we call structural functionalism. But I want to speak now as an evolutionary anthropologist because I think that perspective is useful too, and I'm also an evolutionary anthropologist. And when you look at things from the strategic point of view, which is what evolutionary anthropology tries to do, there are certain very interesting observations that we can make about what is reasonable and unreasonable from the point of view of self-defense. Okay, and how this orientation to try to be morally good, that is the center of gravity for Jewish civilization, can be taken too far and then put people in a position that makes them really dangerously vulnerable. Okay, that's what I want to explore. Okay, so in evolutionary anthropology, we're trying to understand how the structure of social interactions, which we formally call games, okay, that are played in particular contexts, how the structure of those interactions determines which strategies in those games produce, over repeated interactions, the largest expected payoffs. Okay. We're also interested in how those strategies may be embodied in the human in certain, you know, adaptive insights or hunches or prejudices or biases that help us navigate those social games. Now, some of these strategic psychological tools may be hardwired or baked into your genes, but others may result from adaptive socializations selected for within stable cultural equilibria. Okay, so it could be either or a combination of both. To get our conceptual and analytical bearings on these issues, what we do in evolutionary anthropology is apply a marvelous tool that is called evolutionary game theory. And this is a large repertoire of recursive mathematical models and simulations that help us explore how social strategy evolves adaptively over time in particular social ecologies. Now, I'm not going to get into the weeds here. I just want you to understand one of the most famous, or perhaps the most famous result that has come out of this literature. And that is that when you are in a population that has a relatively healthy proportion of cooperators, okay, when cooperators are relatively abundant in a population, then it is maladaptive to be too suspicious. Okay, what is adaptive in that kind of society is to have a strategy that trusts and cooperates. Okay, so your first move is always to assume that the other person is a cooperator, and you try to cooperate with them. That's your first move. Okay, this is true when the relative proportion of cooperators in the group is relatively high, because if you don't do this, if you're too suspicious, then you'll miss out on too many cooperative interactions that have mutual benefit, and that on average will give you a tremendous return. You see, so that's true. Now, what else is true? When the proportion of cooperators falls below a certain threshold, then to have this strategy where you always, your first move is always to trust and cooperate, that's going to get you destroyed, because there's just not that many cooperators. And so what's going on most of the time is that you're getting exploited by people with no scruples, right? By egoists who take advantage of the fact that you want to be nice, and they basically take from you without giving anything in return. All right. So what this tells us is that the optimal strategy has got to be conditional, right? You've got to pay attention to the context. What kind of society are you in? If you're in a society with lots of cooperators, then it'll make sense to be trusting and cooperating as a first move, right? If you're in a society where cooperators are few, then you should be more suspicious and wait to have better information before interacting with anyone, right? And it's true in both cases, both in the society that has a lot of cooperators in the society and the society that only has a few, that you should learn from experience. In other words, if you're interacting with a particular person that has been trying to exploit you in the last few turns, right, in the last few interactional turns, well, it is adaptive for you to be able to learn that it doesn't make a lot of sense to continue interacting with that person, right? So even in the societies where cooperators abound, it is still adaptive to pay attention to the history of your interactions and to adjust your behavior accordingly. Okay. None of this should sound too mysterious, although it was kind of surprising to people who had been, raised on the sort of intellectual dominance of economic theory, right? That was always expecting very selfish individuals. The idea that you could have these equilibria where almost everybody is trusting everybody else, that was a little bit that was surprising to people who were coming from that kind of theory. But it is not necessarily surprising to ordinary folk whose intuitions have been schooled merely by being a human being, and who don't have these distortions of learning these particular disciplines that have these very exotic theories about human behavior is supposed to work, right? So if you're just an ordinary human and you were not trained in an economics department, you may find everything I just said to be relatively intuitive, and that's fine. That's fine. I think it is relatively intuitive. So anyway, the optimal strategy is conditional, right? So you need to pay attention to the kind of society you're in. If you're in a society with lots of cooperators, well, then of course your first move, it makes sense that it should be trust and cooperate. That's going to give you the best average returns. But if you're in a society where cooperators are few, then what's optimal is for you to have a more suspicious attitude. All right. Very robust result, okay? Very famous. The math is very sound. What becomes very dangerous is when something in the socialization process makes it impossible for you to process context, okay? If you can no longer process context in order to decide what kind of strategy makes sense, then you're in serious trouble. You can get hurt very easily, right? So what might do this? Well, if you integrate into your identity, into your process of redemption, that you become a good person when you trust others, when you believe in others, right? Then you become independent of context. Okay, you want to trust others because that proves to you what a good person you are, what a good Jew you are. When that becomes your process of self-redemption, you make yourself vulnerable because you're no longer evaluating context. Okay, you're choosing to trust others because that redeems you individually as a good person. This is very, very dangerous. You're no longer evaluating context. Okay, and you must always evaluate context, because human beings are obviously clay. We are malleable. We are responsive to our environment, to our formation, to our incentives. We can grow in different directions if we, with certain disciplines, explore our own consciousness, right? Or if we fail to do this, right? All of these things can make us better or they can make us worse. It all depends. We're neither good nor bad fundamentally. We are whatever we become. So it is always important to pay attention to context. But if you've decided that you're going to redeem your own self by blindly trusting in others, right, as if there was some karma that's going to bless you for seeing no evil, then you've become an innocent. And innocence can become suicidal because the wicked always devour the innocent first. And therein lies the problem of Jewish self-defense. Okay? Think of the human body. Western doctors are obsessed with the organisms that attack the body. You know, someone like me thinks that they should be way more interested than they are in the defense mechanisms of the immune system. But even Western doctors who are obsessed with the things that attack us, none of them would ever say that the immune system is irrelevant to the final outcome. Obviously, the final outcome is going to be a combination of the thing attacking you and how good your system is at defending against it. All right. So both things matter. Yes, there is a lot of anti-Semitism. It's external to the Jews. It's not their fault. There's a lot of anti-Semitism, granted. But the immune system of the Jewish people also leaves much to be desired. And to explain mass killings of Jews, we need to consider both sides of the coin. Okay? And what I'm talking about right now is this other side of the coin. Many Jews embrace their innocence as a redeeming virtue. I'm going to give you a case in point. I'm going to quote. Listen to what I'm quoting. Quote, "In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. I simply can't build up my hopes on a foundation consisting of confusion, misery, and death. I see the world gradually being turned into a wilderness. I hear the ever-approaching thunder, which will destroy us too. I can feel the sufferings of millions, and yet, if I look up into the heavens, I think that it will all come right, that this cruelty too will end, and that peace and tranquility will return again." End of quote. This was written by Anne Frank, knowing full well that the Nazis were hunting her down, a child who had never harmed them in any way, just because she was Jewish. And what they wanted to do was torture her to death, burn her, turn her into fertilizer. And she was hiding in an attic because if these monsters found her, she was done for. And they did find her. So why is she writing this? This is evidence of the pathology I'm describing. Anne Frank is trying to find something good in the Nazis who want to torture her to death. Why? Because otherwise she can't build up her hopes, quote unquote. This is what she wrote. Okay? Now, Anne Frank is an individual example, and I'm talking about a people. So I'm not offering her as evidence of a populational level event. I'm offering her as evidence of the kind of of how the psychological process works, because Anne Frank is a great author. She's very eloquent. She's a great writer, okay? And she is actually quite transparent in explaining her own internal process. She's saying, I choose to believe that other people are really good at heart, even Nazis, because otherwise I can't build up my hopes. She's describing an internal psychological process that is a consequence of her socialization within Jewish society. She wants to see herself as a good person, and believing in the goodness of others is how she demonstrates to herself that she is a good Jew. You see, it's part of her identity. Now, but is she representative of a lot of Jews? I think so. So from the same war, now speaking about the population level statistic now, it is famous that many Jews accepted from the Nazis that they were going to go to labor camps. And with remarkable docility, they boarded the trains that took them to Auschwitz. Okay? So they too wanted to believe because they couldn't build their hopes up otherwise. And this was very important to them. And it made them very vulnerable. Okay? Now, don't think this is a modern phenomenon. It's not. I'm going to give you an example from antiquity. Right now, we're about to celebrate Hanukkah. Okay, Hanukkah is a traditional festival of the Jews that commemorates a very tragic event. It's a genocidal attack against the Jews of Judah by the Greco-Macedonian Emperor Antiochus Epiphanes, who was the ruler of the Seleucid Empire, which is one of the empires that resulted from the breakup of Alexander's empire. Okay, the famous Alexander of Macedon. So anyway, Antiochus Epiphanes launches a genocidal attack against the ancient Jews, and that attack was narrated in great detail in a very large work by an ancient Hebrew historian. His name was John of Gishala, but that work doesn't survive. The books of the Maccabees do survive. They were written to summarize the enormous work of John of Gishala into a format that could be memorized. And that's what we have. But it's plenty. What the books of the Maccabees say is that Antiochus Epiphanes had already sent his soldiers to kill many, many Jews, and they had killed something like 80,000 Jews. Okay. And the text says, and I'm going to quote, 2 years later, the king Antiochus Epiphanes sent to the cities of Judah a chief collector of tribute, and he came to Jerusalem with a large army. With deception, he spoke peaceable words to them, and they believed him. But he fell suddenly upon the city, struck it with great force, and killed many of the people of Israel. He plundered the city, burned it with fire, and tore down its houses and walls. They took captive the women and children and seized the livestock. End of quote. This is from First Maccabees. 2 Maccabees tells the same story, explaining that the murderers waited for the Sabbath when the Jews were maximally vulnerable. Okay, so on the face of it, this would seem to be a remarkable story, right? Because the Greco-Macedonians, when this happened, when this particular event happened that I was reading to you, the Greco-Macedonian soldiers had already massacred something like 80,000 Jews, according to these books. So why would the Jews believe these guys just because they spoke peaceable words to them. That seems to make no sense. You might be asking yourself, could the ancient Jews really have been that innocent? And the answer is yes, they could. We know this because the modern Jews have been this innocent. We have an exact parallel with PLO Fatah. Okay, PLO is the Palestine Liberation Organization. It's the group that was led by Yasser Arafat until his death and by Mahmoud Abbas, who is still alive. And well, the story of the peace process, very quickly summarized, is that PLO Fatah, this terrorist organization, genocidal organization that was specialized in the killing of innocent Jews, and which had killed many Jews already, spoke peaceable words to the Jews, and they believed them. The Israeli Knesset, the parliament of the Israelis, voted in favor of something called the Oslo Accords, which brought PLO Fatah into the state of Israel, into militarily strategic territory of the state of Israel, to govern the Arabs and that live in the disputed territories. And immediately, terrorism against the Jews quintupled. And all the other problems that we have seen that came out of the Oslo process, right? Everything that's been happening in the last 2.5 years is a consequence of the Oslo process, and everything before that. So why did the Israeli Jews believe Yasser Arafat when he promised peace? It's a pathology, but it's not a modern pathology. Okay, it was going on in the time of the Maccabees. It's going on today. And it's not just a peace process. It happened yesterday. Okay, it just happened again because the people who were living right on the Gaza border, okay, the Israeli Jews who had their kibbutzim, their farms right next to the Gaza border, those Israeli Jews were the most convinced that they had to try hard for peace and try to be good to the Arabs and become friends with the Arabs and shower the Arabs in Gaza with love, because they believed that if they showered them with love, they would get love in return. Okay, that's how hard they were trying to be good. But this is insanity. This is narcissism. To think that you can make another person good just by being good yourself, that's narcissism. You don't have that power. Nobody does. And so these Israeli Jews in these farms right next to Gaza, who were trying so hard to be friends of the Arabs, they had peace programs where, Jewish families would go meet Arab families. They would have events together to socialize, and then they employed Arabs from Gaza in their farms because they wanted to benefit the Arabs. They wanted to befriend the Arabs. They wanted to create a relationship. They wanted to assist them economically, all of these things. And they were obviously not processing the context, because the context was that Gaza was being governed by Hamas, a genocidal terrorist organization that was indoctrinating these Gaza Arabs into a genocidal ideology from an early age, until these Gaza Arabs desired nothing more than the destruction of the Jewish people. They desire this more than their own lives. And these Israeli Jews in these farms next to Gaza, they were not processing this context. And the Gaza Arabs that became their employees in these farms the people they were directly benefiting, befriending, these Gaza Arabs, they gave crucial intelligence to the jihadi orcs, the Hamas jihadi orcs that tortured to death 1,200 innocent Israelis and took 250 hostage. So this kind of innocence is lethal, and this narcissism of innocence is especially lethal. Okay? There is such a thing as trying too hard to be good. It can make people crazy. And trying too hard to be good and becoming this kind of pathology, that's no longer ethical. You should not confuse this kind of behavior with ethics, because every one of us has an ethical obligation to our own self, and that is your primary ethical obligation. Rabbi Hillel the Elder said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And he also said, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? He also said that because he recognized that each one of us has a primary ethical obligation to our own selves, to our family, to our people. It is not ethical to abandon your own self-defense. Okay? And this is what happens when trying to be good gets distorted in always giving an advantage to people who want to exploit you. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing at all. Much less giving an advantage to people who want to kill you. That is unethical. It makes monsters more powerful. And it is never ethical to make monsters powerful. Okay? So I hope that this is useful for us to reflect on how to lead ethical lives, because of course we have to love one another. That is the basis of ethics. But you are also one of those people that you need to love. You yourself. And if you don't defend yourself, you abandon the world to monsters. No republic can survive if it does not defend its borders. That's another way of saying it. No society that wants to be a society of peace and amity and charity and solidarity can survive if it doesn't defend itself from those who would destroy all of those things. So I think this kind of reflection is very important. We need to help our Jewish friends understand the difficulties, the psychological and cultural difficulties of their own self-defense. They need to have this explained. And I think the more the Goyim explain it to the Jews, the easier it will be to communicate. So, I mean, this is, I'm trying to set the example here, but I hope that many Goyim listening to me, many non-Jews who are listening to me, who see this clearly, because I've noticed that other non-Jews see this very clearly. Many Christian Zionists see this very clearly. They comment on this all the time. The Jews have a problem with their own self-defense. Okay, so we need to explain it to them. We need to do that work and help them develop consciousness of the fact that they must stop getting manipulated by the people who want to make them vulnerable. They need to just say no to that and simply defend themselves. And if they need an incentive that has to do with loving their neighbor, fine, I'll give it to them. If they don't defend themselves, if the Jews don't defend themselves, all of the West will die. How about that? The West needs you. And if you don't survive, Western civilization will not survive. So that's another way of producing the necessary motivation for Jewish self-defense. Anyway, I'm out of time. I hope that you'll read the article, and I hope that you'll like, ding the bell, subscribe, and share this video. Share it because our Jewish brothers and sisters are in danger, and we all need to do our part to make sure that we don't see another catastrophe, both for them and for ourselves. Thank you very much.